Hello, everyone. Thank you for your patience and welcome to the webinar titled Getting the Most Out of Siebel CTMS with APIs, presented by Perficient's Param Singh. Param Singh is the Director of Clinical Trial Management Solutions in Perficient's Life Sciences practice. My name is Eugene Stefanoff. I'm the Marketing Manager for our Life Sciences practice. And before I turn it over to Param, I'd like to cover a few housekeeping items and provide a brief overview of Perficient as well. All participants on this call will be in listen-only mode, which means that everyone is on mute. You are welcome to submit questions to the speaker at any time today by typing them in the chat feature, which is located on the left side of your screen. Please do make sure you state your questions clearly and keep in mind that other webinar participants will not see your questions or comments. Your questions to the speaker will be anonymously addressed as time allows towards the end of the presentation. And if you do have unanswered questions after the webinar or would like to request information about our services, you are always welcome to contact us through the information that is provided throughout the presentation. And you're also welcome to fill out the contact forms found on Perficient's website. Please note that today's webinar is being recorded and it will be sent to you within several days along with a PDF version of the presentation. So now that we've covered the logistics, let's move on to a quick overview of Perficient. We are an IT consulting company that offers a whole host of solutions for a bunch of different industries, including, of course, life sciences, as well as financial services, consumer products, insurance, and a few others. We have employees all over the world, including the locations you see on this slide. And as you may expect, most of our clients are based in North America and Europe. So this slide here contains a bunch of facts. Just to point out a few, we were founded in 1997. We're a publicly traded company on the NASDAQ. And lastly, at the moment, we have a little over 2,000 employees. So we're going to move on to the next slide. So Perficient offers its clients many different types of business and technology solutions, everything from business process management and information management to content management systems and portals. We simply have a broad portfolio of solutions we work with. The services we provide are what you would expect from any IT consulting company, such as implementations, upgrades, cloud hosting, support, project management, and so on. But when it comes to life sciences, specific IT applications, we cover data management, EDC, safety and pharmacovigilance, clinical trial management, and data warehousing analytics. And finally, Perficient has many different software partners, including, of course, Oracle, which is the maker of the CTMS we'll be discussing today. So that does it for the overview of Perficient and our housekeeping items. I'd like to turn it over to our speaker today, Param Singh.
Thank you, Eugene. So let me start by introducing myself. My name is Param Singh, and I'm the Director of the Clinical Trial Management Solution Practice within Perficient Life Sciences Business Unit. I've been working in the industry since '99, and during that time, almost exclusively been working with the Siebel CTMS, Siebel Clinical Product, since that time. I've been with Perficient Life Sciences Business Unit for 7 years. In fact, yesterday was my 7-year anniversary with the company. And before that, I was part of Accenture's pharma R&D practice and leading Siebel CTMS implementations there as well. And overall, now I've been part of 30-plus implementations of Siebel CTMS now. And these all vary from implementations for large pharma companies, CROs, medical device companies, academic institutions, and they also range from small local implementations of 5 to 10 users that we host to global implementations of over 4,000 users. And each type of and size of organization has their own approach for implementing the solution. So I'd like to wrap up through the introductory slides just by talking a little bit about the CTMS practice at Perficient and explain a little bit more about what we do specifically. So we provide a variety of services and products related to clinical trial management. So we manage implementations of Siebel Clinical, whether those are custom implementations of Siebel Clinical or implementations of our Siebel Clinical Accelerator, Ascend. Also, if you've seen some of our previous webinars, you know that we do extensive work with integrations in and out of Siebel Clinical and related systems. Our approach to system implementations is very process-focused, and we also provide our process consulting services to help organizations define and harmonize their SOPs and business processes across their organization with respect to clinical trial management. And then we also offer comprehensive training services and products related to Siebel Clinical, and our Ascend application. And this is just a glimpse of some of the services and products that we offer in the space and from my practice. And for more information on other practices within Proficient Life Sciences or across Proficient as a whole, please feel free to contact us or visit our website. So here's a look at today's agenda. So we're going to first define what an API is and what it can be used for. We'll then go over what is new in Siebel OpenUI and what capabilities with respect to APIs is included in the release. There are published APIs included in the release, but the release in general also allows for additional APIs to be configured and utilized. So next, we'll get a little bit technical on how APIs can be set up in Siebel and in the Siebel OpenUI. We won't spend too much time on that as I'd like to spend time going over specific use cases for those APIs within CTMS. We'll then we'll move on to that next, and I'll bring some basic benefits of each. And specifically, the use cases, we're specifically talking about Siebel CTMS, but the use cases that we're going to mention today are going to be relevant even for other Siebel applications, right? So from an API perspective, a lot of what we're going to cover today is going to be more general in nature across all Siebel applications, so for other industries as well. So once we go over those in the presentation, I wanted to give everyone on the webinar a little bit a flavor of some of those in a live demonstration environment, so you can see some of those benefits firsthand and see the different ways of implementing some of those. So in terms of content for today, we're going to be lighter than usual from a webinar perspective. So I want to spend a little bit more time in the live demo environment. So I think that seeing those things firsthand is going to be beneficial. So we'll spend some time in the demo environment, looking across some of the things that we've put together, and then we'll use the rest of the time as a general Q&A session. And if you do have questions along the way, please go ahead and just log them in the chat feature, and I'll be able to answer that at the end as time permits. And if we run out of time, if there are questions, we can respond to you via email directly regarding your question. And with that, we can get started. If you are having any trouble seeing what's on the screen, particularly when we're in the demo, there is an option to click full screen to enlarge it. in your window. So let's first define what an API is. API, it's an acronym for Application Programming Interface. And essentially what that means, or what APIs are a set of routines or tools for building software applications. They basically specify how different software components are going to interact with each other and how those components are going to be used for an integration. So APIs allow integrations of features into other applications in a predefined way. Certain applications come with existing APIs that can be used to interact with other common applications. So these APIs offer the ability to leverage various third-party web applications within a particular solution. APIs allow to share content and data between different applications as well. Examples are, APIs can allow applications to display embedded files, photos, videos, and posted content on web applications. These are just a few basic examples. We all use APIs all the time with some of your applications. You may have a web meeting software that you use in your organization that has an existing API or an existing integration with Outlook. So when you schedule a meeting in Outlook, you can embed the web meeting information automatically. Similarly, if you schedule a web meeting outside of Outlook, it may sync up automatically with your Outlook calendar. That's just one example of some existing APIs that exist for common applications like Outlook. There are many other examples of various applications having existing APIs to offer these types of sort of integration benefits. So what's new with Siebel OpenUI with regards to APIs? Well, Oracle provides a fully published JavaScript API with this newest release. So the JavaScript API that is included essentially allows companies to customize the Siebel Open User Interface in a variety of different ways. The published APIs support anything from simple validations on fields to replacements of whole user interface components that require rendering in a special way. So you can make the Siebel application look nothing like the traditional Siebel application that we're used to, and even align the application's look and feel with your own company's website or other web applications. So you can deploy Siebel without anyone really knowing that it's Siebel, the Siebel engine behind the scenes. So you can make Siebel look like any other web application that you have within your company, or even your company, align it with your company's website. And I'm going to show you an example of that during the demo, as we have time. So the new JavaScript API replaces browser script, Siebel browser script from previous versions of Siebel. Browser scripting is still supported, by Oracle, but Oracle strongly recommends converting your browser script to JavaScript API. So this new API set of tools allows you to combine, your traditional Siebel tools development and configuration with JavaScript API. So the OpenUI allows you to do more outside of Siebel tools to change the user interface, so it reduces the dependency of traditional Siebel configuration through tools, and allows for quicker turnaround for certain types of changes to your application. So it's important to note that the JavaScript API is not applicable to your high interactivity or standard interactivity clients. So those of you that are on 8119 or below, that's our traditional high interactivity or standard interactivity clients that are running on Internet Explorer only. So with the latest release of Siebel, it's still possible to release the high interactivity or standard interactivity versions of Siebel. So even if you're on 8.1.11 and above, you can still deploy those traditional look and feel of Siebel, the high interactivity client, either instead of OpenUI or alongside the OpenUI application. So you're able to deploy both versions. The JavaScript API is only relevant to your OpenUI versions of Siebel deployment. So I have a slide here to discuss some of the technical setup of the JavaScript API and how to use it within Siebel. This may not make sense to most people on this call, and I have to be honest, it doesn't mean that much to me either, but I'm told that some technical folks will understand what's listed on the slide. So, essentially what's listed here is there's two main steps that a user needs to do or a developer needs to do to create a custom client user interface in Siebel and utilize these APIs. One is creating a new presentation model that Siebel OpenUI uses in addition to the metadata and data that it gets from the web engine that resides on the Siebel server. And then the second thing is creating a new physical user interface by creating a custom physical renderer that Siebel OpenUI uses in addition to the predefined or custom presentation model. Now, again, it gets a little bit technical, but this is laid out pretty well in technical detail with all the included methods, functions, and even examples on the Siebel Bookshelf Guide. So it's really laid out really well in the documentation that's provided. But what's great about this process is that it allows you to use tools and user interface components that are available online to embed in the Siebel application. So for example, for those of you that are familiar with Siebel, for calendar fields, date fields where the calendar pop-up, sort of comes up. If you don't like the way the calendars that pop up for date fields are rendered by default in Siebel, you actually point to another calendar pop-up render that your organization already uses in other web applications or your website, or if you like a certain way that certain data is represented, like those calendar pop-ups that you see online, you can actually configure your Siebel application and your user interface to use that instead. So that's essentially what this OpenUI allows us to do, is to use components that are outside of the Siebel set of tools and embed them or incorporate them into your user interface. And again, the whole focus here is to provide a lot more flexibility with the user interface sort of development and composition, and also to allow you to have consistent look and feel across web applications within your sort of IT landscape. So if users are using multiple applications, you want them to have a consistent sort of look and feel. It helps out with training and usability and user adoption. So that's really what the new OpenUI and the JavaScript APIs allow you to do. So the JavaScript APIs, in Siebel UI, OpenUI, which control the user interface rendering, are one example of APIs. You can also build custom APIs with the tools that are included in Siebel. External web applications typically have APIs that other applications can leverage, and that's what we're going to look at in these specific use cases in the next few slides here. The first of which is a custom API that can grab available exchange rates from Google Finance or Reuters. So both Google Finance and Reuters have existing APIs, right, that can provide this information externally. So they already have APIs on their side, and then building a custom API or custom API in Siebel could actually grab that information automatically on a daily basis from these online sources and update the exchange rate table automatically in Siebel. So for those of you that are system administrators to a Siebel system or any other system, that it falls on you to do that task to update, let's say, exchange rate information and administration within Siebel if you're doing sort of a global application with multiple currency, and so that falls on an administrator to sort of maintain that table. This custom API could be set up to simply get that information and create a new record in that exchange rate table for each currency combination that's requested. So, now I understand. So maintaining that exchange rate table for CTMS is not typically a daily or sort of effort-intensive task, but by implementing this, you can eliminate the need for manual administration of that information, which would save time and resources, and always ensure that exchange rate information is correct based on a trusted source. So you're not manually maintaining this information. It's actually being updated based on a trusted source. Another example of an external web application that has existing APIs that we can leverage in our Siebel application is Twitter. Social media is an important part of any business these days, and there is important information that is communicated through these channels, and so it can be useful to have that visibility within our Siebel CTMS application as well. So, for example, for our account lists or our organizations that we have in our Siebel CTMS application, to see the Twitter feed for each of those accounts or organizations, we could render the application to include it in a couple of ways. One way would be to create a new view or subview under the account screen. So when you click on an account, along with seeing views for addresses, affiliations, and documents, and activities, you would also see a view for Twitter, so which would display real-time Twitter feed information for that selected organization. Assuming that we have their Twitter account username, let's say, as a field that we capture on that account or contact. So another possibility would simply be to add a small embedded Twitter web app on the account more info view. So there are standard APIs and these web apps that Twitter allows users to use and embed on their websites, and we can leverage that. And with OpenUI, we're able to take advantage of those and simply include them into the Siebel application with some sort of minimal configuration. Similar to the Twitter example, Google offers several APIs that can be used in external web applications. It would be beneficial to see the latest news related to an account you're working with. So again, looking at the account example, the hospitals, the sites, the CROs, the different organizations that you interact with, it would be useful to see some of the latest news related to those accounts and sites in your CTMS application. We can use the same approach of creating a new view, let's say a news view, underneath the account screen, and have those real-time news and stock quotes information coming directly from the Google websites or their APIs. Again, social media for the individuals that we interact with may also be valuable. So you can use the application and existing APIs from, say, LinkedIn to view updated profile information about companies or individuals, physicians, for example, from LinkedIn. Again, we can do this in a variety of ways, but if we take that same approach of creating subviews you know, what that gives your organization is the flexibility to
I think we've lost Param. Let's wait another minute, see if we can get him back. Sorry about that. I think he thinks he's still talking. 1 second.
is Google Maps.
Hey, Param, I think we had lost you for about 30 seconds or so back on that LinkedIn slide. Do you mind going back on that slide and continuing off?
Sure, not a problem.
Thank
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Thank
okay. So the last part of this slide I was mentioning, you know, the different approaches that we can take. And so if we take that same approach for creating views underneath you know, the accounts or the contact screen to show this information, you're actually able to utilize the user access matrix and responsibilities to control, you know, which user types may see that information or what you choose to hide that information from. So just by, you know, creating separate views, you actually have a little bit more flexibility as to, you know, who may have access, or who you would want to have access or visibility to these additional views. So another valuable API that we all use all the time is Google Maps, right? So we you know, we all use Google Maps all the time. And in the Siebel application, we of course have address information within the application for our sites and our investigators. And currently, we may take that address information, copy it out of Siebel, open up a Google Maps window, paste it in there to get directions, a bird's eye view, or, you know, look at where they're located, or even see, you know, sort of what's nearby that particular address. With Siebel OpenUI, we can actually utilize the Google Maps API and display that map information for that address in the system, you know, either in street or satellite mode. So you can actually embed that directly in the application. So here's an example screenshot of that capability. So you can see, like, you know, if you basically have an address, you can actually pop up the map directly within the application without having to go to a separate web page. And we're going to look at this live in our demo example as well, but you can see how, you know, beneficial this would be directly in the application. And finally, the last example that we have to look at is Google Analytics. And this could be other, another analytics platform, but we've integrated it with Google Analytics. So with Siebel and the Google integration, we can actually report on various usage statistics on our application. You can do things like how many people are accessing the application, what days and times these sessions are happening, and what our peak time is for usage. You can also look at which locations folks are logging into the application from. So you can get some real valuable statistics of usage that we really weren't able to get before very easily. And we're going to look at this example live as well in the demo, but I do have a couple of screenshots just to show you some of the capabilities. So here is an example of location. You can actually look at different locations that are accessing the application, how many sessions are happening, or across the geography. Here's a drill down view. So if I drill down into the state of California, it will actually show me the different cities or different region within California where these sessions are originating. And here are the number of sessions per day, so you can actually see sort of graphical representation of how many sessions you have on a daily basis or an hourly basis, monthly basis, etc. And that brings us to our demo. So I'm going to share my screen, and we'll go over each one of those at a time here. Let's see. And Eugene, I'll rely on you to let me know whether you can see my screen or not.
Sure, it's loading up. I'll let you know when it's here. Okay, we're good.
Okay, great. So the first example that I wanted to show you, which we're pretty excited about, is utilizing our the new JavaScript APIs and utilizing OpenUI and rendering the application with a variety of controls that are not necessarily included in traditional Siebel. So for those of you that are used to Siebel, even if you looked at OpenUI, this is traditionally what it looks like, right? With the tabs across the top and then the applets and the views. So what this other example shows us is that we're able to take an existing Siebel application and actually render it so it looks almost nothing like Siebel. You can actually align it, like I said, with your company's website colors. Here's an example of a calendar applet that we pulled from somewhere else and rendered it differently. These individual sections are applets, but we've created it in such a way that again it doesn't look like traditional Siebel. So this is just a brief example of some of the things that you can do with OpenUI, utilizing that JavaScript API. And again, if you want some detailed conversations around this, we have other examples that we can share of some of the different capabilities that we can do with OpenUI. But I did want to bring this up just so you can see what we're able to do with OpenUI and Siebel. So the next examples that I want to look at is our sort of integration examples with some of the external APIs that we have. Now we've done them in a slightly different way than was mentioned in our in the slides, but you can sort of look at this as different approaches that we can take for these integrations. So for example, let's look at this particular account. So we're going to go into the Perficient account. So we've in the slide deck I mentioned we can create a view which will basically be a page container that will pull up the Google Finance information or Google News or LinkedIn information and display it directly in a sub-view. Again, that's one example of doing that. There's also embedding it on the forms. What we've done is dynamically create links to where the information for this account would be on these particular websites. And so what it'll do is it'll open up a new website that'll look for news for related to that account. So if I click on those icons, it'll pull up the news, real-time news related to Perficient. Again, we can embed this exact information in real time in a sub-view as well, but just to show you the example of what we're able to do, this is how we've created it. So again, if we go into a different account, now I'm in the Oracle account, if I click on that, it'll show me the news related to Oracle. So it's a dynamic dynamically built URL that'll point you directly to where you need to go to search for news related to the account that you're concerned with. In the same way, we've done it for Google Finance. So if we click on Finance, it's going to take us to the stock quote for the account that that we clicked on. So again, I was on the Oracle account, so it's going to take me directly to the Oracle Google Finance or stock quote page. Again, if I go into a different account, it'll take me to that relevant page as well. So again, this web page again could be embedded directly in the application, so we're not having to sort of open up these new windows. But again, just to show you that example, that the dynamic URL that it's taking us to could very easily just be embedded in a subview. But this is how we chose to do it for the demo. And the same thing can occur for the LinkedIn, right? So it's going to take us to LinkedIn, and in this particular example, since we don't have the exact URL, it's going to do a search for the account, and then you'll be able to see that information by clicking on it. If we do some additional configuration, we can actually include the link directly to to the landing page for that organization. But in the short amount of time that we had for the accounts that we've put in here, we basically put a link in to search for the account on LinkedIn. And you can do the same thing on for contacts as well. So this is something that we did here and just embedded that information within these icons, and that would open up the information that you're looking for. So those are three of the examples. So your LinkedIn, your Google Finance, Google News. You could do your Twitter in the same fashion. And again, any of the information that came up on a pop-up window on a new tab, we can actually instead have it as a separate view. And again, that approach will give you a little bit more flexibility as to including that in your user access page, and including that in your list of views and responsibilities, and be able to control that in a user administration capacity. So the next one we want to look at is our Google Maps. So for Google Maps, we've enabled it in this environment here, where I'll go into our account list, and I'm going to do a quick search because we have a bunch of accounts in here, but I'm going to look for, so we have a couple of accounts here. They have their address information. So what we've done again is create an icon that's dynamically pulling the address information from the account, from this address fields, and it's going to pop up. This is more sort of again embedded within the application rather than taking you outside. It's going to do a pop-up right here to that particular address. And you can see that in Street View or Satellite View. You can open that you can open that up into Google Maps as well. So if you need to do directions and things like that, it's a more streamlined way of so you don't have to do the copy and paste. Either you can do it directly here and click on the directions, or view it in Google Maps, and then see the if you're searching for nearby hotels, if this is for a site visit, or you just need directions to it, everything is sort of embedded into the application, or from the application. So again, this is dynamically built. So if I go to a different site, a different address, and click on the map, it's going to refresh on that particular address. So that's 1000 Main Street. So it's pulling it up on the Google map directly in the application. All right. And then the last example that we'll look at, and to me is really sort of useful is the Google Analytics. So if so I'm logged into Google Analytics, it's pointing to the environment that we're in. It's pointing to my application. It's pulling in relevant information about that particular application. So I can see the number of sessions on any given day. How many people have accessed this application, by week, by month, by year, or by month, by week, by day, or hourly. So we can actually see that sort of usage statistics directly, in this Google Analytics. We can see the number of sessions, number of users. Some of this information is particularly useful. You can see the language. If people are accessing the systems, globally, you can see, sort of the locale based on language, or you can actually see the location. If we go into location, you'll actually see, from where in the world they're accessing the application. So if I were to, click on United States, it'll drill down into United States and show a map of where these sessions are originating. So if I again click on the great state of Texas, it'll show me where my sessions are originating. So you can see that sort of usage statistics, and this is for a particular date period. So you can actually refine that and say I want to see it for a certain date range, and you can see those changes dynamically. So the number of sessions will reset based on that date. The other thing that I find very useful is the ability to see browsers and OS. So with the latest version of Siebel, since we are seeing that it is accessed through multiple browsers, we can actually determine through Google Analytics or some sort of analytics tool like this, what our users are using, what browser they're using to access the application. One of the things that we've seen with the change for OpenUI is, while it's supported across all browsers, there may be some nuances that are a little different, and from a system support perspective, that could be one sort of useful variable, right? From a user standpoint, what browser they're using if they're encountering some sort of issue with a configuration. So that's something that you can look at in terms of overall usage. You can also look at devices that they're using. So since the new version is also device agnostic, if they're using any sort of mobile devices, you can see if they're using an Apple iPhone or Android phone to access the system, you can actually look at those sessions as well. We're also able, this is sort of sort of logging this for the date range. You're also able to see somewhat real-time information. So if you look at our real-time overview, I'm going to try to log in on my iPhone and see if it should show you that I'm logged. A new mobile user is logged in. So it sometimes lags just a few seconds, but typically it'll update that and show you that a mobile user is logged in, and there it is. So as soon as your sessions are active, this is doing a real-time sort of analysis of your site, and it can show you real-time statistics as well. Of course, there's only one user. I'm the only one on the system, but certainly for your application, if you have multiple, you can actually see those real-time statistics. You can also see real-time locations as well, right? So there's, I believe, if you drill down, you can see that I'm accessing it from San Antonio. So there's that level of analytics data, usage data that you can sort of get from your system, and this is all through these these APIs that are interacting with each other between the two applications. So I guess I'll leave it at that. So from a demonstration perspective, we looked at a variety of different APIs and from a demo standpoint, and I think for the remainder of the session we'll open it up for any questions that may have come up. So with that, I'll hand it over to you, Eugene, if you want to facilitate the questions.
Sure. All right. So if anybody has questions, feel free to type them in the chat feature, and we will address them. At the moment, there aren't any questions, so we'll give it a minute or so to see if we get them. And in the meantime, I'll just throw up the contact information slide, where if you have any questions, you can call any of these numbers or email Param or the Life Sciences Info email address.
All right. So if there aren't any questions specifically, today, I just want to I'll just close it out that with the new version of Siebel OpenUI, with the JavaScript API, with custom APIs that we can build, and some of the existing APIs from some of these other external sources that are available, we're really able to do a lot more with the Siebel application than we were used to in previous versions, right? Siebel applications, whether you implemented them, at one company or another company, they typically look and feel and operate the same way. So here's a way now that gives you that added flexibility of creating an application that is truly your own. Utilizing some of the existing tools, web tools that you already have for other web applications. I think I hope I've relayed that sort of benefit during the webinar today. But really, the possibilities are sort of limitless at this point. And it also brings a very common skill set that you can leverage, right? Typically, in previous versions, you would have to have that Siebel tools configuration skill set in-house to be able to implement enhancements. Whereas now, with the JavaScript API, you're actually able to leverage a lot of sort of common skill sets in-house from a web development standpoint, and incorporate those into your Siebel development stream and enhancement and continuous improvement work stream. So I think that really adds a lot of value from a delivery standpoint as well.
Great, thank you. So it doesn't look like we have any questions, so that will end Param's portion of the webinar. Please note that today's webinar will be available on Perficient.com within several days for you to review and share with your colleagues. We have several other upcoming webinars scheduled. We have one on January 29th, which is titled Features of a World-Class Safety System, and that will discuss the features of ARGIS safety. In February, we have a webinar that's related to HIPAA compliance and its relationship to pharmacovigilance. And another one is going to take place in March, which will discuss disaster recovery and business continuity for your clinical and safety systems. The next CTMS webinar will be the top 5 enhancements you can make to your system. So stay tuned for that, and you're always welcome to see the schedule on Perficient's website. So thank you so much for joining today, and we hope that you found